Redditors who have died and been resuscitated, what was your experience? Did you see bright lights? Nothing? Do you remember anything about it? Just blackness and a really warm and comfortable feeling, like if you were being hugged by a bed, but I could hear a low muffled sound of people talking. I've read many of the comments here, and the one thing that is consistent is the feeling of being warm. This makes me feel so much better when I think of when my mother died back in May. I hope she was comfortable like what's been said. A very warm blackness. Wasn't cold or scary. Very calm and serene. Best nap I've ever had. 5 out of 5 stars. Not in a hurry to do it again, but certainly not scared to die when the time comes. Now the heart surgery I had after being resuscitated. That was painful and awful, so I do not recommend heart failure. 0 out of 5 stars. My experience was very similar. The worst was when I was ripped from that comfortable place back to the real world. Felt like I had been thrown into an ice bath. I felt the same as if I had went to sleep. I had an alcohol withdrawal related seizure and woke up in the hospital bed. I was told my heart stopped for 8 seconds. Although the one thing I remember is this feeling that the weight of the world lifted off my shoulder. It was such an indescribable feeling, but it was as if everything that I care and or worry about is so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. It makes the thought of dying someday less frightening. I really shouldn't either come into this thread. From what I can remember, I was 16. I had a big operation and we did not know I was deadly allergic to morphine. It was the most peaceful sleep I have ever had in my entire life. It felt like nothing but somehow something, you know? I vividly remember seeing someone resuscitate from another point of view, but I could have made that up. Woke up with my dad holding my hand saying, "You scared the crap out of me." A couple years later my dad had the same experience after an operation, and the same thing happened to him as me. He woke up. I couldn't be more thankful saying those words. And after we told him, he grabbed my hand and said, "I got you back." Your dad sounds like a cool dude. Read 6 or 7 comments. Got that existential dread feeling and now I gotta go watch a cat knocking things over or something. Reading this has made me feel kind of better. My dad is dying in the hospital tonight, and I know this is Reddit and a bunch of strangers. But it's nice to know he probably won't feel anything but peace when they take him off life support. Thank you for this thread. Hug your loved ones close. I'm so sorry for your loss. Not me, but my grandfather. He had a heart attack and he said before they shocked him back it was the most peaceful experience of his life. I hope his actual death 20 years later was just as peaceful. Like one of them back from school naps, where you see, feel, hear nothing, but yet you know it happened. Honestly, this may be the most comforting Reddit thread I've ever read. Dying is just fading into a deep sleep. I love that. I'm a little less afraid and can live a little more fully. Everyone should see this. Thank you. Exactly this. Every time that I think about death I have a panic attack thinking of all the interpretations that people have of it. To think it could be anything like these wonderful people have said would be nice. A warm fuzzy silver room. Last best memory with family all around, but only in shadow form watching TV. Everything was so fuzzy and shaky. I think the warmth came from pee myself during a grand mal seizure. It was a comfortable feeling though. I've been defibrillated twice out of a tachycardia, when your heart beats extremely fast and doesn't effectively pump blood. Both times I remember being extremely scared and then like the worst impending doom feeling, then almost like passing out and feeling like the most calm feeling ever. I don't remember coming back after being defibbed, strangely enough. I had a lot of PTSD from the event and I honestly wonder if my brain just erased that part. Selective traumatic event amnesia is quite common. I was put into a coma, so it's not the same, but it was beautiful. Endless darkness and peace. Just peace. Not even a sense of self. Just an unbelievable feeling of peace and safety. No pain, no nothing. Genuinely wish I could go back. I posted an answer to this a few days ago in another post. No life flashing before my eyes or anything. Just cold water, darkness and a feeling of not being in control. I almost drowned while crossing a river. I remember being in the water and then feeling panicked because I was being pulled under. And that's about all I remember. It felt like I skipped some time and came to in a helicopter with some guys leaning over me asking if I wanted some ginger and honey tea. Crazy experience. My wife had a similar experience. She is, or was, can't be around rapids anymore, an experienced kayaker, but had a very bad accident. She described it as spinning wildly for hours, with no sense of any time, space or direction, and couldn't decide if she was alive or not. Very peaceful nothingness, like a really good nap. I woke up in a lot of freaking pain though cause they had to break my ribs resuscitating me, and then when I was recovered from drowning and my broken ribs, I spent the next while in a long-term psych facility for kids. This sounds like the start to a really good book NGL. Had a bad allergy episode, slipped into anaphylactic shock, very weak, very little control over motor function and very difficult to speak but could hear very clearly. When I realized how bad it was, I started to feel really cold quite quickly. About the same time everything started to fade. For a brief moment things were hazy fuzzy, but very quickly faded to black. It was a calming black, definitely not anxiety inducing. That already happened, and just a peaceful kind of nothingness. No out of body, no visions, no light, just dark nothingness. Came to after what seemed like 20 seconds, but doc says it was actually more like 20 minutes. Prob longer since I saw family member there that did not make the drive with me. The office was a good 30 minutes drive from home. I overdosed on fentanyl a while back and was fading in and out, but all I remember was a sense of complete nothingness. No memories flashing, no bright lights to follow, just nothing. Looking back at it I almost felt at peace. But waking up right after the overdose was sheer panic at the thought of almost dying lol. Glad to be almost 2 years clean now. Congratulations. I had a blocked artery from a fib. I basically fell asleep but woke up immediately. I was in the ER which I had little memory of arriving at to begin with. My mom was there and when she realized I was awake she went up to hug me but stopped BC of the wire in my arm and kissed me on the head saying I'm so glad I have you. Lord knows what I would do if I didn't have you. She sat back down and asked if I wanted anything. I said no and just partially walked out of the room to tell them I was awake. After what felt like 20 or so minutes a doctor came in and explained the wire in my arm and a bunch of other AFib stuff and how they were going to keep me there. But the important takeaway from the interaction was that he was wearing black gloves. After that I tried to adjust myself in the bed while my mom and the nurse were talking about prescriptions. My elbows just dug into the bed, like straight sank into it to the point where I started to fall in. It felt like my back was grinding on ice. But then I woke up again. This time I was surrounded by doctors that were trying to resuscitate me and putting the wire in my arm. It was the same doctor who I thought I talked to before putting the wire in, who I recognized from his hair color. I don't really remember a lot after that. BC I kind of just dozed back off and after that it was just darkness. To not make this too long I woke up in the same scenario I talked about before happened, but this time the doctor who came in was wearing white gloves. Same doctor, different gloves. Everything else was the same. The way the tears dried on my mom's face, the blood splatter near the eye of the glove stood out to me. BC I had never seen a doctor wear black gloves before. I haven't told anyone. BC it was just a lot easier to not be hounded with questions as a teenager who wanted as little to do with anyone anywhere. My husband was on life support in a coma. He was not expected to make it and had to be brought back multiple times. I was by his side, beyond distraught. He was by far the sickest person in the ICU, too sick to transfer to another hospital. Other people who had family in the ICU rallied around to give me support as it really didn't look hopeful for him and my pain was obvious. A family in particular helped me out a lot. The grandpa of that family had surgery gone wrong on his foot, resulting in his foot amputation, followed by an infection then death. Even after he died his daughter stayed at the ICU to help me. When my husband finally pulled through and woke up he told me he had been walking the halls with some guy who was missing his foot who told him it wasn't time to go yet and that his daughter would wait with me till my husband woke up, but he had to wake up soon. This is freaking crazy. I remember feeling the most at peace I have ever felt in my life. I saw colors I could not begin to describe and felt warm. I remember feeling my grandfather's hand in mine and hearing "It's not your time. You need to go back." This was due to a suicide attempt in 2019 where I had jumped off a 3-story parking structure. Not sure how I didn't end up paralyzed, but I broke the best part in my spine I guess. Attempt failed successfully. Glad you're still with us. It felt like I was returning home from a long journey. It felt more familiar than this reality. Consciousness left my body. I was looking down on myself. It felt as if I had become my highest, truest, purest self, and I was filled to the brim with love for myself and all else. It cured my 11-year treatment-resistant clinical depression and reignited my will to live. During the experience, I asked myself, how did we get here? Referring to the unconscious dead me sitting in the chair, and instantaneously I saw my life flash before my eyes, and I saw how I had become depressed, and the stories that I believed and adhered to that kept me in that dark place. I also felt as if I had the choice to return or not, and as soon as I said yes, I woke up, transformed. Afterwards I began fasting for spiritual purposes, and lost 80 pounds in 8 months, and began meditating. 6 hours a day, and today I feel like a completely new person and continue to feel better every day with yoga and the other practices I have adopted. I have also dedicated much of my energy into exploring, understanding NDEAD's mystical experiences and their transformative potential, and hope to become a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist to help others who might be in similar spots as I once was, without risking their lives, through experiencing ego death's positive disintegration, meeting God. Whoa, that's a very powerful story. I'm glad you saw the light. Not mine, but my dad. He had his appendectomy at the highest risk possible, being diabetic, having waited 3 days on I just ate something bad, abdominal pain, dehydrated, you name it. He got rushed to the hospital after not being able to walk anymore. He described it as a dark, warm calm, like submerging yourself in a warm pool that filled every part of his body till his bones. He said he slowly felt how all worries vanished and felt utterly happy but nostalgic. He also said he could hear the voice of the surgeon calling him, return, don't go, but he felt it was annoying. After a little while he realized he was dying, so he grabbed onto life and said he felt like he was pushed out of the warmness to a cold suffering where he felt pain, anxiousness and a severe nostalgia of what he just experienced. After waking up from anesthesia he cried. Kaur said he really wanted to go, but gripped strongly into life because he'd miss us, their sons. Interesting how many people seem to describe it's a choice to live. There was a really good story for a question like this on here. Guy said he lived an entire life basically, had kids, and one day became so fixed on a lamp that he stared at it for days until he woke up in an ambulance. On the 14th of August 2018 my dad called me into the living room because he needed help with something. So when I got there I asked what I needed to do, and right then my vision disappeared. My words began to mix up and I fell down and my heart stopped. But thanks to my mom having studied a lot of medical stuff, she began doing CPR and my dad called 112, 911, and an ambulance arrived within minutes. I woke up about half an hour later in my living room with 4 medics around me, and they began asking me a bunch of stuff and I didn't understand anything. After a few minutes I began to understand them, and they were asking me to move X limb, try to smile, try to stick your tongue out. I couldn't move a muscle, not even my eyelids. All I could do was cry, so I did. They quickly brought me to the ER and I stayed in the hospital for another 8 hours while they did all types of tests on me, but they didn't find a single thing wrong with me. I was in perfect condition and they didn't understand it. I have no lasting damage from it, but I have to do a medical check once a year just in case. An old friend described it to me after an OD. They said they saw every single color all at once, and heard every single sound harmoniously. They said it was mostly an indescribable and surreal experience, so beautiful yet haunting. This is most definitely a downplayed paraphrase, but their experience always fascinated me. I'm not religious in any way or spiritual for the most part, but when I tried to kill myself at 19 with an overdose, apparently I died 2 times in the hospital. I vividly remember a bright white light and in the distance, 2 shadows, one taller than the other, the taller one wearing a wide brimmed hat. Well, from what I could make out in the silhouette, without moving in any way, it was like they were throwing memories directly into my brain and I was remembering them, except they weren't my memories. Things I'd never seen before, moments in time I couldn't have been around for, etc. I described this to my mom afterwards, who said her parents, who I never met as they died when I was a baby, matched the description. her dad always wore that style of hat, and the furniture I described in these memories I was given matched what they had in their home. It was almost as if they were throwing memories at me, all they had left, to keep me from coming into the light. Back then I had no purpose in life. Now I have a daughter and life makes perfect sense to me because of her, so I'm glad I'm still here. I don't think of this at all these days, but this post reminded me of it. Amazing. Thanks for sharing your story. I had an emergency C-section. When they started to cut me open, I could feel it, so they placed a mask over my face and I knocked out almost immediately. While I was out, I felt like I was weightless and not me, but I don't know, energy, like I was floating through a maze and the walls of this maze were a soft, glowing white. There were images and voices beyond the walls. They were familiar and I wanted to stop and listen, but I was moving along through this maze, unable to stop myself. I didn't really try, though. I was just ebbing and flowing along. Suddenly I felt very, very sad. I knew I had died and I was sad because I wasn't going to see my baby or see him grow up. Then there was a voice. I don't remember if it was male or female, but it was trying to calm and soothe and let me know that all was well and not to worry. Then I heard my name being called. It was my husband's voice, and then my mom's, and then a nurse. They asked me my name and the date and if I knew where I was. For the life of me I could not open my eyes, though I felt like I was trying very hard to do so. There was a very, very bright door or window directly across from me. I kept asking my mom and my husband to close the curtains or close the door, but they were confused. They said there was no window or door, just a blank wall. I asked them to turn off the lights because it was too bright. They said the lights were dimmed. I insisted they close the curtains and or door, please. The light was really, really bothering me. Come to find out, once I did manage to fully open my eyes, there was no door or window, just as they had promised. It was just a blank wall. Anyway, baby and I are fine. But my husband told me that I had to be resuscitated during the C-section because they lost me. I was the victim of assault with an aluminum baseball bat. Hit 3x from behind. Didn't pass out initially, just a lot of blood. They took me to the hospital and they had to intubate me and I can remember it very vividly. I started to flatline I guess about the time that they started it. I came out of my body and floated above the table. Went through the doors just like I was floating. Saw my parents with their church members praying in a circle around the ambulance outside the hospital. I was swept away into the clouds into a light that was so warm and inviting, and through the bright and vivid light I saw my grandmother who's been dead since 1998 and she looked so young and healthy while trimming her flowers in a garden. I tried speaking to her but couldn't. She acted like she couldn't hear me although I felt that I was screaming at the top of my lungs. Then almost instantly I was whisked away from the light. Even though I wanted to stay, I couldn't. I started falling into a deep and dark place that felt almost like the light was being sucked out of the room. It was an eerie and awful feeling to say the least. About the time that I was reaching what I felt was the end, I woke up in a major hospital about 2 hours north of our home. I explained these things to everyone around me that would listen and my mama cried and cried because there was no way that I would have known about the prayer circle outside without experiencing that truly amazing experience. I was killed in a head-on with a semi. Reality turned to vibration and I was sucked out if they back off my skull. I found myself in a void completely comfortable and at peace and knowing full well I was dead. Went through a bit of a life review where a lot of things flashed through my mind and afterwards I saw the light. In my case however the light was actually what my eyes were seeing from my slumped over corpse. I saw my phone on the floor of my truck and had a thought that I wanted to get to the phone to say goodbye to my wife and kids, and as I had that thought I was pulled into the light and back into my body. I'm an atheist, which makes this whole experience a bit of a mind frick for me. I expected nothingness upon death, which is exactly what I got, but I was still conscious of it, which I did not expect. Either way, I've been in pain for 8 years straight now for having pulled through. I'll just embrace death next time. I watched the person resuscitating me from above and behind them at about ceiling level. Then I was back in my body while I heard a strong 50-60 mph wind blowing. There are a lot of drowning experiences in this thread. I guess that is one of the more common events that one can come back from. Thanks to all who are sharing their stories. I must say this has been one of the most sincere and relieving threads about the nature of death that I've ever read. I bled out after getting jumped and tortured. My heart didn't stop, but I remember feeling all the warmth leave my body. I remember drifting in and out on the concrete hoping someone would find me. When I realized no one was coming to help me, I just sort of accepted it. I didn't want to die, but I was okay with it. After all the warmth left, I felt like I was being coddled in a dark cloud. I started to hear people talking to me. I remember hearing my grandma, who had died years earlier, telling me I had to get up and leave. I tried to explain that I couldn't see anything, but then all the voices stopped. Then I saw a hand come out of the darkness and caress my bloody face. This is when I came back to consciousness and realized it was a man. Later I realized it was an EMT. He wasn't caressing my face but was cleaning blood off me. I tried to jump up as my fight or flight started to kick back in. I was in an ambulance, but all I could smell was blood and flesh and I was panicking. Didn't even take one guy to push me back down because I had lost so much blood. I've never been religious and I never will be, but this experience really made me question life. I was in a bad place at the time, selling drugs and hurting people often who would try and steal them from me. What really made me do a 180 with my life is that I can't get the memory of all of those people talking and barely audible voices out of my head. Again, I'm not religious, but I do think that whatever I was hearing saved my life. Every time I remember hearing my grandma tell me I couldn't stay, I get the feeling I wasn't supposed to live, but by some miracle I was able to stay alive. My family doesn't know about this, and I guess the only person I have told in real life is my girlfriend. Death doesn't scare me anymore, but never having truly lived scares me so much. I try my best every day to make people's lives better. Of course I'm human and sometimes I slip up, but I think that if I've been given another chance, or whatever you want to call it, I shouldn't waste it. Not me, but my dad. He was 15, on his way to a basketball game with his high school team, when a drunk driver came around the corner and hit their bus. The bus tipped over and my dad's head got stuck out the window, between the guardrail and the bus. Apparently his head left a dent in the guardrail, which has since been replaced. He describes the stereotypical bright light scenario. He saw a white light, and he explained that he heard the voices of deceased loved ones telling him it wasn't his time to pass. His next memory, he woke up in the hospital. He had several surgeries to fix the broken bones in his face. At the time, he was also told he wouldn't regain use of one of his arms, which was paralyzed. He was, however, able to regain use of the arm. If you saw him in person today, you would have no idea something like this happened to him. I'm lucky to be here. Friend of mine was learning to rappel down a building, froze up and free fell to the ground and died. He said it was a very comfortable blackness and a distant light that was beckoning him. Like he knew that going over to that light was what he should do, but he didn't have to. The light was warm and comforting. He was revived in the ambulance. Says he doesn't fear dying anymore. Tell your mate he should try rappelling down the building instead of propelling. Heck of a lot less dangerous. At 12 I almost drowned in a pool surrounded by my family. I remember hearing their muffled voices, splashing, and laughter slowly fading until all I could hear was my heartbeat. I panicked for a bit and then that went away too, and the last thing I felt was just a warm peacefulness and a vast darkness. It wasn't scary at all. This isn't about me but my wife, and she wasn't brought back, but I felt like sharing anyway. My wife died last week. She had been battling cancer for over a year and it was beyond treatment. When she got pneumonia, AMD ended up on a ventilator for almost a week with no real improvement. We knew we had to let her go. What happened after that was horribly traumatic for all of us that were present. But one thing about it makes me wonder. They took her off the ventilator and she continued to breathe on her own for 5 hours, but the breaths were ragged and strained, especially for the last hour or two. Towards the end it became very clear we were going to lose her soon. Let me give a little background before I get to the end. For a couple days she would occasionally open her eyes, but they weren't open much, and she would just stare straight ahead, like she wasn't really seeing anything. So around 10 minutes or so before she officially passed, she opened her eyes completely and stared straight up towards the ceiling. A few minutes later she closed them again, Her breath became slower and slower and finally stopped. I can't speak to what she saw obviously, but she definitely saw something there. I like to think it was something that gave her peace because she finally gave in and let go. Does anyone else believe in an afterlife? Or that you can contact the dead through dreams? I was brought up religious, and although I'm not religious as much anymore, these dreams I experience give me a sense of hope that we never fully disappear. My mum's granddad, passed away around 8 months later. I woke up from a dream where my granddad had returned. My whole family was sitting outside. It was a summer afternoon and we were having a BBQ. My granddad was sitting down, surrounded by the whole family, explaining how peaceful dying is. He jokingly mentioned how he met a famous actor that had also passed. Can't remember the actor's name now. He told me he loved me and missed me. I said, "Granddad, I'm so happy you're back." I woke up from that dream and thought that was strange. While driving to school I told my dad, "Hey dad, I had the weirdest dream about Granddad last night." And then my dad said, "Me too." And here's the freaky part. He described the exact dream that I had, word for word. Same location, people, etc. He said he knew it was Granddad by the way he made jokes about the actor. He still had his same humor. We were so shocked. And that's not even his father. It's my mum's. My dad also had a dream about his own father who had passed. They were driving along an old country road and his dad said, "You're the only one who can see me. Everyone else can only hear me." Later that day, his mother called him and said, "Do you know what's strange? Whenever I dream about your father, I can never see him. I can only hear him." Coincidence or not, that definitely gave me a new perspective on the afterlife. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.